Welcome back to the Low Stick Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Retz, along with my co-host,
Eric Dettman.
We are going to talk about championship season. I can't believe we're already at the beginning of May here. The way the weather was at the beginning of April, I had no idea it was going to turn out the way it is now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I look out my window right now, and it's a downpour, and it's all we've experienced. So I'm hopeful that a few of these nicer days that we've gotten recently is a continuation of what we're going to see in the future.
Yeah, I would hope so. All right, so let's dive into some championship season outlining. Now, for those of you who have listened to us, we've talked about some training. We've talked about coaching different types of athletes. This is not a training podcast today. Today, we're going to talk about maybe some of the things you should think about as a coach, how you're going to develop some of your rosters, what your goals are, what you're looking at as you're moving into your postseason. For some of us, it's happening sooner than later. Some of you may have already started into some of those conference or qualifiers for your state series. So we want to dive into all kinds of stuff that's looking at how you could set them up successfully to help your kids perform at the best of their ability. So what are some of the things that you think about when you start thinking about your championship season?
Yeah, the first thing I'm focusing on is our qualification process because it's a little bit different from state to state. And what do we have to do to prepare our student athletes to qualify for the state meet? So if we're looking specific to track and field, our district meet, which some states will call their conference meet, that's our qualification meet. So when we go in, we have to finish in the top two of our individual events, or we can finish under a certain time. That's historically, it's the fourth fastest time at the previous 5 state meets. So an average time. And then there's one other kind of confusing way that you can qualify. But that's kind of what my first process is okay, what do we need to do to automatically qualify for the state meet? And a lot of times I'm thinking of that from a time standpoint. What do I got to do to get my boys to run under 8:34 in the 3K in order to automatically qualify regardless of place? So that's kind of the first thing that I'm starting to think about in when it goes to that process. And even that dates back into like January, February, March to get kids ready for those performances. How about you?
So we are similar in a way. We have our conference meet, but it has no bearing on our state qualification. Then we go to our sectional, which is our meet where we take the top 2 performances or a qualifying time. And same way, it's a formula that they use. It's like the 11th fastest time on average over the past several years to get in. So it is possible to qualify, but you're only allowed to have 2 people per event in Illinois. So I could potentially only have 2 milers qualify, even if I've got 5 milers that have the ability to hit that qualifying time. So as I start to look at who is going to be running what, I'm going to look at who has the ability to score at the state meet and kind of work backwards from there as I start to prioritize which events people are going to be in. So for example, our conference meet is a great meet. We've got great competition, but I may not run some kids in their best event there, knowing that just a couple of weeks later, we're looking to qualify for the state meet at those events. I don't necessarily need them to be able to run that at the conference level. And for you, it's similar in a way, but you're setting it up so that you've got your best kids or who you think are going to qualify or score points at the state meet, setting them up maybe a little different than somebody who is just trying to have a shot at competing there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll kind of build that season out a few months in advance to figure out like, okay, we're going to run the 800 here. We're going to run the 3K there. We're going to double the 15 and the 8 at this meet. All of that is in preparation for what our district meet looks like. And for us, a lot of the thought that goes into that is our district meet is probably our hardest meet of the year. And the reason I say that is because all of our other league meets, all of our other invitationals, like there's a lot of time in between these events. So if I'm at a league meet, I've got a JV heat of the 15, a varsity heat of the 15, a JV heat of the girls 15, a varsity heat, so on and so forth. We've got 12 heats of the 100. There's so much time. Whereas when we get to our district meet, we've got a varsity heat of the 15, we got a varsity heat of the 15. And then we go, 3 events later and it's the 800, or 4 events later, it's the 800. So there's not that much time. So it's preparing those kids for what those potential doubles might look like as well. So we're trying to map all that out as we go through the as we go through our season to figure out, how are we going to get our kids where we want to go, and specifically what events are they going to run to try and qualify for the state meet. And we have the luxury of probably being in the most challenging district. So like this past cross country season, we were the only district that had four team qualifiers on both sides, both genders. We've had years where a girl runs, 10:08 for the 3K, which is just outside of that automatic qualifying range. And she doesn't go to the state meet because we've got so many other people who've run faster.
Right.
So it's kind of a battle when we get to our district meet. Like, if you're going to the state meet, you deserve to be there.
Absolutely. And, when we think about that, one of the things I like to do is, as the season starts, in my brain, I look at my roster and I kind of tier my kids. I've got kids who I think are going to be placers at state. I've got kids who I think are going to be qualifiers in state. And then I've got kind of everybody else who is trying to earn a spot onto a relay or potentially on that borderline to qualify. Even if you don't stand a chance to qualify, it's kind of in that same boat, because I've got to plan your season according to how far you're going to make it. Where are we going to maximize your performance? So hopefully at some point you're already there. Since we're at the beginning of May, you're already there. You've kind of tiered your kids together and what you're looking at. So now we look at, all right, so who's got experience and who's new to it? So how much for you when you move into championship experience, when you move into the championship season, how much do you lean on the experience of your kids, knowing how to handle those environments, moving from week to week, from your qualifiers all the way to your state meet?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different, or handled a little bit differently if we're talking about cross country versus track and field. Specifically track and field, a lot of times I'm gonna choose experience over youth, just because it's a little bit different. You have rounds, for some of these races. When you get to the state meet, it just makes it a little bit more challenging. And the going into the district meet and knowing like we've got to run this specific time, rather than like just hang on for dear life and let's see what happens. Those are two very different races, and I think that experienced athlete is the better option for some of those types of meets, just because of what they've gone through and the meets that they've run at, and in the races that they've been a part of, to teach them how to be ready for those moments.
So, in cross country, we have the ability to have several alternates who may not run in any of our championship races, but to experience it all the way through. In relays, we also have alternates that we have the ability to do that with. But have you ever kept a younger kid in the 15 or the 3K who maybe one day is going to qualify there, and keep them through the end of your championship season to experience what that's like with someone else who potentially is a qualifier?
Always. Yeah. I think that's like one of the most vital things to our program is we want to expose those kids as quickly as possible to those types of experiences, because we have an expectation that at some point they're going to be a part of it. And we don't want that first time to be a shock. And here's kind of a little story that happened last year that I love. And I've told this a number of times, but we had a freshman girl who's talented, didn't qualify for the state meet just because our district, from a sprint standpoint, we had one of the best sprinters in the entire country. So she didn't qualify. I told her, like, hey, we're going to take you on the 4x4 because I want you to be an alternate. I think you can be successful. She had never run a 400 in her life. And I just wanted her to be a part of the experience. And 1 week before the state meet, she's like, I've never run a 400. So coach, I think I need to run a 400-meter time trial just in case I run. If you're going to put me in it, like, I need to know I can do it. And so she went out and ran like 65 seconds or something. Like, oh, that's pretty good. And then the day before, we took another freshman who hadn't qualified, but was an alternate on the 4x4. And she was and they were best friends. And she's like, we should race each other. Like, we should race each other to see how fast we can run. And she ends up running, I think like 62 seconds or something like that, which is pretty good.
Right.
Again, there was no expectation she was ever going to run at the state meet, but she just allowed herself to envelop herself in this experience, and she wanted to be a part of it. And I thought it was amazing that she took it upon herself. Fast forward 3 weeks later, when we go to Nike Outdoor Nationals, and we're like, oh shoot, we need a 400 leg for our DMR. And what happened? She split 60.2.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen if we don't give her the opportunity to be an alternate. Like, I solely believe that experience happened because we gave her that opportunity and she wanted to take advantage of it. So, and I think anytime you get the opportunity to take some of those young kids, you got to do that and just give them that experience, give them jobs, right? They're not just there to hang out and and cheer and not really do anything, but give them jobs, make them feel like they're a part of the experience. If you win a trophy, have them stand on the podium with you. I think that's a really valuable experience. So I kind of word vomited. Let's hear about you, because I know that's something that you guys do too.
No, that's very similar. We try to include as many people as possible. And one of the problems we have being just a little smaller building is sometimes we don't pair up people who potentially qualify in the mile or the 2 mile later on, because they're going to be a part of that 4x8 as an alternate. And so they are kind of mimicking what that 4x8 potentially is doing. I think in years past, we had a foreign exchange student who was going to try to do something similar, pace a kid to see if this kid could be an alternate for our 4x4, and ended up being our anchor leg on our second place 4x4, and missing, literally winning the state championship by less than a shirt's width, and so it's just amazing, the opportunity. You let them hang around. You're not letting them hang around, right? You're letting them experience what it's like to be in a championship season, which can be completely different than what the rest of the season has looked like. Now,
Right.
you can phrase things however you want, but there's just a certain sense of urgency that kids get to experience and be a part of when they're part of that championship format. So as you're phrasing things, going through your season, and you start to hit the beginning of May, you maybe start to stress some of those key points of why you're there, what you're doing, giving them jobs, or how important it is to the team. That can definitely help set you up for success in the future, if not weeks later at the national championships, right?
Totally. And I think for us too, like, we use this as a bit of a recruiting tool, right? So for us, our fall season is our soccer season. I know it's different in Illinois. But if you take a kid to some of these big invitationals, or you take them to a state meet experience, they're going to remember that forever. And so many of those kids that we've had, we've introduced them to those situations, end up being cross country runners in the fall. Like, oh my gosh, one, the coach believes in me. And two, they're creating these awesome experiences. I get to travel. Like, what's the most fun thing we did when we were high school athletes? It was travel. It wasn't the meet, but it was being there with our friends, being in the hotel room, go to the dinners, all these different things. Like, they love those experiences. So we've used it as a recruiting tool too. And I've used it in cross country of like, we really need this person to be more committed. We're going to bring them down to the state meet, and they've earned it, right? I'm not like just bringing some kid who I think you're talented, but you haven't done anything right. But like somebody who's shown the ability to be good, but also shown the desire. We'll give them that experience, and that's potentially a life-changing event for them as well. But yeah, that recruiting piece has been pretty helpful for us.
So let's talk about potentially some of the details as a coach, as you're thinking, right? We're at the beginning of May. Hopefully you already know where your qualifier meets are going to be, or where your state meets going to be. What are some of the things you can do to help set yourself up for success in that championship season? Do you have to travel the day before? Do you have to stay overnight? What are meals going to look like? What are some of the other details that you think about as you're starting to set up your season, or set your kids up for success when it comes towards the end of the year?
Yeah. So the Oregon State meet is interesting in the sense that distance from the Portland metro area is not a ton. It's 100 miles. So you can get there in 90 minutes to 2 hours or so. So there are some coaches who want to just drive down the day of, and then they'll come back, and they'll drive down and they'll come back. I'm a big proponent of staying down there, again, because the state meet outside of the actual meet itself is an experience, and it's a really cool experience for our kids. So when I'm mapping out our season, what I know we're going to do at some point is we're going to mimic that state meet experience. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to go down to Eugene for the Oregon relays, and we're going to stay in a hotel for 2 days. And we don't actually have to stay in a hotel that first night, Thursday night, but we're going to do that because I want to closely mimic what the state meet experience is going to be for the kids. We're going to go down, we're going to stay in a hotel, we're going to eat whatever meal, we're going to get up, we're going to do what we do on Friday, we're going to come back to the hotel, we're going to go through that same process, because I don't want that to be a foreign process for the kids when they get down to the state meet. So for me, as closely mimicking the state meet as possible is one of our most important things.
Well, it seems silly, but it's a dress rehearsal. I mean, it's as simple as the kids knowing where they're going to get their shakeout in, right? They're not getting lost on some road somewhere. They know from the hotel where they can go for a run and where they can't go for a run.
Right. And we always stay at the same hotel. That's something I kind of learned from my York days with Mr. Newton. We stayed in the same hotel there. Like, I want our kids to know what those beds feel like, and to know that, like, I can go to this room and I know I'm going to get sleep. And there's not the fear of being in a new room, a new bed, a new this, a new that. Like, our kids are dialed in with that experience. And it's the same thing. Thursday we eat, the same meal in the hotel lobby. Friday, we eat the same meal in the hotel lobby. And then Saturday, we go out and do what we got to do.
Yeah, that's absolutely one of the best things you can do to set them up for success is to do that dress rehearsal. So now we kind of know some of the details as we were setting up, getting there. So now we kind of talk about the mental side of it and setting expectations. What is the expectation of your programs as you start to move into meets? Does it vary from kid to kid? Are you looking at stressing the state meet? Or are you looking at stressing at the qualifier, or is that going to vary as well?
I think that varies a bit, because there's certain kids where you just know that they're going to qualify. Like I look at the girls 800 this year, and there's a certain, a couple of girls where I'm like, I just know you're going to qualify just because I'm looking at their other competition and what they're capable of doing. But yeah, I mean, with some of those kids, like we really have to stress the district meet, and in a sense, it almost turns into their state meet because without performance at that meet, there is no state meet. So we're gonna really try to encourage our kids to be as ready to go for that competition, knowing that 10 days later they're going to be just fine if they qualify for the state meet.
So So let me ask you this to go off of that, as you're looking at the progression of races, getting those kids ready, there are some coaches that believe that you need to dress rehearsal, you're going to run these events at your district meet. We want you to run them in advance. What are you thinking? Let's just say 4 weeks out from their qualifier, assuming they're going to qualify. And let's just say they're a 3K kid. Okay, 3K kid, is going to qualify. I'm assuming everything goes well. What is their season going to look like leading up to that? Are you running them in 3K every week? What does that look like?
No, I personally think from an outdoor perspective, and some of this stems back to kind of what I learned when I was in high school. Some of it stems from just conversations I've had. Is like our kids can really only run really high level 3Ks, probably 3, maybe 4 times in their season. So my top kids will run a 3K either next week or the week after, and then they won't do it again until the district meet. And then that state meet, is their kind of their third opportunity to run a really high level 3K. And every kid's going to be a little bit different. For some kids, like last year, we had a kid who got COVID and then got sick after that and just had like a really, really horrible spring with sickness. And we ran 3Ks back to back to back weeks. And he needed that. He needed to see like, I'm capable of running fast because his first one wasn't good. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so far off the qualifying standard. And then the second one, he was a little bit better. I'm like, dude, you're only a few seconds off. And then the third one was more successful. So, every kid's a little bit different, but in a perfect world, yeah, it's probably like 3 of them. How about you?
Yeah, we're very similar. If you're a kid that's going to run 3,200 for us in Illinois, you're probably not going to do it more than 3 or 4 times during the year. And if you have to do it more than that, so for example, at the conference meet, if we're going to put you in it, we're never going to race for time. We're only going to race for place. And if we know that somebody's going to be off the front, we're not going to try to go for a standout performance. Like, okay, this kid's 20 seconds faster than you. This is not the time that we're going to say, try to hold on to him and see if you can PR, right? We're going to put you in there and say, okay, run with the group. Let's just try to be top 3 today. And if somebody goes off the front, let them go. If the group catches them at the end, great. But we're not really stressing going for a timed effort that close to the championship season if we know that they're probably going to be a qualifier in the 2 mile there.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And I think, some young coaches, they get really excited about their kids wanting to run fast and throwing them to all these big races. And, there's this big name and that big name. And I think it's just, trying to focus a little bit more on patience and recognizing like that fast racing opportunity is going to be there at the end of the year. But even if it's not, at the end of the day, would I rather break 9 minutes or win a state title? I'm hopeful that all my athletes say win a state title.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm going to coach them.
Yeah, exactly. And I look at being a distance runner similar to being a high jumper. High jumper, if they're jumping every single week, they're not going to get better. Their best performances are probably going to be early in the season. And so if you're trying to race your kid every single week in what their best event is all the time, you're probably not going to have a ton of success with them in their progression at the end of the season. There's too many races in track to be able to do that. You didn't do that during cross country season. Why would you do that during track season?
Totally.
All right. So now we've kind of got an idea of their progression. So let's talk about potentially what it looks like for them as a qualifier, as a non-qualifier, right? Somebody who's going to try to just help score points. Maybe they're just going to try to get that 6th spot and earn points for the team. What does it look like for you as far as Does it change the way you're going to phrase things for that kid who we know their last race is going to be that district race and they're not going to be running in the state meet, or even kids who potentially aren't going to be running that district race, right? Kids who are going to have an early season.
Yeah,
What's the terminology? What's the verbiage look like? The expectation you have for them.
I think for us, it's pretty similar. We have a lot of those conversations with all of our kids, and we highlighted of like, whatever is your A race, and we talk a lot about like A race, B race, C race, like whatever is your A race, we need to be dialed in and locked in specifically for that race. And the training that we're going to do up to that point is going to lend itself to allowing us to be successful. But there's all these other things that we have to do to get there as well. So the way that we're going to talk to those kids is going to be really similar. Like, you have a responsibility to the rest of your teammates to run well, because if you run well, it's going to give them the confidence that they can run well as well. We're all going through the same thing. We're going through the same training, the same process, the same, pre-race conversations. So as long as you take care of your job and your responsibility, our other kids are going to take care of their responsibility as well. And we try to feed off that, right? Like, if the JV district kids pop off, like, dude, if this kid just ran this fast, how fast are you going to run? Because you've already run that fast, and you run significantly better in workouts, or faster in workouts.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about that. And then one thing I do for the state meet kids, their very last race, and I always get teary-eyed when I say it to them, is, let's say it's somebody who's going to run the 3K. It's their last race ever for Lincoln. And I just walk up to them and say, hey, there's nothing I can tell you at this point that I haven't told you before. So the last thing I want to say is thank you. And I just thank them for being a part of the program and for buying in. And I recognize I'm not always the hardest person to run for, and I'm demanding, and I'm this and that. And I just want them to know how much I've appreciated their impact and their buy-in to the program. So, that's kind of what that looks like for us. I'd imagine you guys are a little bit different because of conference and sectionals and state, but I'm curious of your perspective.
Yeah, we've transitioned into different conferences over the last several years, and we're one of the smallest schools in our conference, and it is a very good track conference here in the state of Illinois. And we try really hard to be successful there, but it's definitely not our priority. We won conference last year on the guy side, and the girls just missed winning the conference meet. And that was great, and we celebrated it. But I think almost every kid knew at the end of the day that that wasn't the end all, right? We were trying to get further than that. And as you know, track and field scoring at the state level is not what it is at the district or the sectional level, right? The best overall team may not ever bring home a state trophy, right? They could score in 16 of the 18 events and not win a trophy. So I think for us, we put a lot of team stress on our sectional, and that's important to us. Our girls have won it, I think, the last 20 years. And the guys have won quite a few as well in that time span. And we know that that's really the ultimate team meet for us, where we want to show out as a top sixth placer in every single event. We want you there in that position. And so we work really hard to emphasize every single point matters regardless. We get to the state meet, and anybody that qualifies, obviously, we're stressing to them the importance of what they're doing for the people who couldn't qualify. But it's a little different setting, right? And it's hard to transition that way, because some kids, especially that are new to track and field, we had a basketball player came out last year, has done a tremendous job for us. Was kind of asking, well, the best teams aren't winning. I mean, 2 kids just took home that state title. How does that happen? If you're from a team sport, you don't exactly understand it. So kind of reframing what success looks like for us at the state level sometimes, because we've had our fair share of state trophies we've brought home, but we've had better teams that haven't won state trophies before. And so I think finding the success in what we do as a group is still super important, even at the state meet.
Yeah, totally agree. And let's talk about that success, non-success, finishing below expectations. If people don't, they don't accomplish what they're hoping to accomplish, whether that's a state meet or a conference or sectional meet, a qualification meet, what do those conversations look like for your guys?
Man, that's tough because it depends on the age that they are and where they're at. We've had several people in relays get disqualified for things, or people not perform at the best of their ability. Here in Central Illinois, one day it could be 40 degrees, and the next day at the state meet, it could be 110 on the track, right? So you can't prepare for what the weather is going to look like. And I mean, the weather's been good so far this April, so hopefully it will hold out through the end of May. but the conversation can be different based upon the age of the athlete coming in, right? Sometimes a poor performance out of a senior, I mean, it could simply just be a pat on the back and just knowing that you care about them, right?
Yeah.
A younger kid, the conversation could be, look, you're laying the foundation what you're going to do in the future. You've been here before, and now you know what to expect. Now you know what the failure feels like. Let's see what the success can taste like when we put in the work. So that conversation can look 180 degrees different from one person to the next, depending on where they're at in their journey as an athlete. What about for you? Now, I know that you've had quite a bit of success, even at the national level, 4x-mile national champions a year ago. How do your athletes absorb your conversation with them, with the successes and failures of those performances?
Yeah, I think it's individualized, like you said. I have I've talked about this before at a couple of coaching clinics. I have a weird way of cheering for kids. So like my top boy this year, who finished 31st at NXN, for whatever reason, for a while wasn't really getting recruited, and I would yell things at him like, everybody in this group is getting recruited except for you. Or last year, I had a kid who's now running for University of Oregon, who was pretty good, 8:14, 3:49 in the 15 and the 3K. And there was an article that was written by DieStat about this meet that we were at, and his name wasn't mentioned, even though he was a kid who finished 26th at running lane and 7th or 6th at the state meet. And I'm yelling things like, they don't think you're good enough to be in this race. They won't even write about you, which sounds funny, but like, I recognize that that's really motivating for my kids. Versus like other kids, it's a much different conversation. Some kids, I'll be just, kind of brutally honest, like, you are in this position because you haven't done what we've talked about doing. We've had one-on-ones, and if you talked about, I want to, run this time or finish this place or run this meet, whatever, you haven't done the things that you need to do in order to get there. So having like those brutally honest conversations, I think, is really important. And then the hardest one, I think, is just like that. I'm sorry, like, sometimes that's life, and life it's not always kind to us, and you've done everything right, and you've been an amazing person, and you've been an amazing athlete, and you still didn't qualify. And we've had a fair share of those types of kids. Those conversations are really, really hard. And normally it just ends with a hug and like, I love you and I care about you and I'm so proud of you. And this singular race doesn't define you, and it doesn't define what you've done. And I'll try to tell them, like, some kid is going to win a state title at some point, and your name is not going to be mentioned as a part of that state title, but you are very much part of the reason why that person's going to win a state title. And just trying to remind them that everything that they've done to this program is going to be felt for a long, long time. But those conversations are hard. But the successful ones are really fun. Winning the Nike Outdoor National 4x-mile was really exciting. And the conversation going into that was, again, like, nobody is writing about us. Nobody thinks that we're capable of these types of things. And rightfully so. Like, we haven't done some of these things on the national level like some of these other schools, but certainly we're going to use that to fuel our fire. And we're going to get really excited about that. So I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but that's kind of what a lot of those different conversations look like within our group.
And the fun thing about those is it's going to change from year to year and person to person. And, this sounds really gimmicky, but when you're focused on the journey and caring about who the person is, the result, it's just part of it. Right. And it's not the end all. As long as those kids are understanding and becoming better people along the way, that's really the most important thing. I was reflecting on a couple of my athletes who have just finished up their collegiate careers, and it's been unbelievable who they are as people. And they're there because of what they've done as people, not necessarily just as athletes.
Right.
So let's talk about potentially, as we get towards the end of this, just a little bit quickly about postseason meets. All right, so we set somebody up for the state meet. They've run really well. What are some of the options that somebody might have after the season to run to try to maybe get another PR or earn some type of title on top of?
Yeah, totally. Some of the big ones that we've done and during the track and field season, just last 2 months ago, we went to Nike Indoor Nationals, which was exciting and fun. We'll go to Nike Outdoor Nationals this spring. You have the New Balance Outdoor National Meet out at Franklin Field, where the Penn Relays are held. You've got the USATF Championships. I think the actual championship meet is in Eugene, Oregon at Hayward Field this year. So there's a lot of really awesome opportunities. And I think if you're a coach who's looking, you have some of those kids who are excited and hungry and want to experience more, there's definitely opportunities to take advantage of that. And that's been a big part of our program, is exposing our kids to some of that higher level competition. I remember we went to the Nike Outdoor Nationals directly after COVID, and we just took our girls, and they were super excited and ready to go. And it didn't go as well as we wanted. And in the DMR, we finished dead last. And that was a really low moment for us, but it was also a really powerful moment, because our kids were like, we never want to experience that again. We never want to feel that way again. And we want to work really, really hard to make sure we never experience that again. So I think that these post-season meets can be a really great primer for the season. I think that they can be a really successful future development opportunity. But there's also something about getting out of our typical routine of a conference meet, a state meet, and we're just going to go out and race at this local meet that's running a mile. There's no expectations. There's no pressure. I don't have to finish in a certain place in order to earn X, Y, Z. I'm just going to go out and see how fast I can run a mile. And I think that that's a really powerful experience as well.
So we know those are great things to do. So as a coach, just on the side, some of the things that you potentially have to think about. All right, what are my flights going to look like? How far out? If I know somebody's going to qualify, I should probably be starting to get interest today on
Right.
what they want to do, right? What are my flights going to look like? What are my hotels? Where am I going to get food? Where are they going to run while we're out there? Because not only are they going to race, but they're probably going to need to get a run in at some point early as well. What's the meet entry look like? If you're in Illinois, as soon as that state meet is over, you cannot coach your kids, right? You've got to have a parent that's going to step up, travel with them, help them out along the way. Now, obviously, you can give that parent guidance, but you're hands off as far as coaching those kids. And in some states, I know you have the ability to continue to coach them in postseason. So sometimes that's a little easier transition depending on what state you're in. But those are all things that you need to be thinking about right now if you are thinking about having a kid go to a postseason meet, which are definitely fun to do. The environment's different. You got kids from all over. The few that I've experienced and been a part of, so it's just absolutely a blast. It really is the love of the sport a lot of the times that you're there.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And watching your kid race out at Hayward Field last spring was pretty special. So I would highly encourage anybody to take advantage of those opportunities.
All right. So the important thing moving on here is, if you're not thinking about these conversations and where you're putting kids here at the beginning of May, you need to start doing it right now. Don't race the legs off your kids in preparation to it. And make sure you're setting them up for success. All right. Anything you want to add to that as we approach the end of this thing?
No, I think we're good to go. I think this was, if I was a young coach or a new coach, I think there's a lot I would get out of this.
Yeah, the outline for it is super important. And sometimes you don't think about it until you get there. And you can really change the outcome in a positive way the further out you're thinking about where you're going to race your kids and how successful you think they potentially could be. All right, so as we finish up this season, we're going to start talking about summer training in our next episode at the beginning of June. So hopefully you will have some great success here in the upcoming weeks, and we're looking forward to answering any questions that you might have. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all those other fun things that you're supposed to do with social media stuff. Hopefully the weather will be great in the summer and we'll get some good miles in, hopefully some good postseason racing. But until then, we will see you next week, or I'm sorry, this month.
Yeah. Thanks for your time.